Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. 1,000 years before the events of Harry Potter, four of the greatest wizards of their age united to found the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin achieved the impossible. They built a school from the ground up in an era when witches and wizards were cruelly persecuted. However, disagreements soon arose among the founders, and in the end, Slytherin left the castle. It is often believed that he was the darkest of the four, but in truth each of them had their own difficult choices and hidden shadows. Even the kind Hufflepuff had secrets in her past. Let's explore the most fascinating facts about the founders of Hogwarts. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Rowena Ravenclaw was responsible for Hogwarts' design and name. A brilliant magical architect, Ravenclaw poured her talent into creating the moving staircases and vanishing rooms that continue to amaze students to this day. Legend says that she also came up with the name Hogwarts after a dream in which a warty hog led her to a cliff by the lake. Number 2. Helga Hufflepuff excelled in culinary charms. If Gryffindor was a master of duels and Slytherin of legilimency, then Hufflepuff was famed for her food-related enchantments. She is believed to have created the very first Hogwarts feasts and even devised spells that made the work of house elves easier. The legendary Hufflepuff's cup may have been one of the earliest magical items used to transport dishes into the Great Hall. Number 3. Godric Gryffindor wielded a sword against Muggles. Gryffindor's sword was forged by the Goblin King Ragnak I. But why would a wizard need a blade if he had a wand? At that time, secrecy laws did not yet exist, and wizards often fought against common folk. Gryffindor used his sword as both a symbol of power and a weapon of protection, an artifact that carried the weight of history itself. Number 4. Slytherin intended to use the Chamber of Secrets as a classroom. The Chamber of Secrets is shrouded in a sinister aura, but at first, Slytherin wanted to use it as a place to teach spells the other founders disapproved of. Essentially, it could have become a secret space for the study of forbidden magic, foreshadowing Dumbledore's army, only with a far more dangerous focus. Number 5. Salazar Slytherin was inspired by a Portuguese dictator. The formidable name Salazar was no accident. Rowling admitted she borrowed it from Antonio de Salazar, Portugal's prime minister, from 1932 to 1968. Living in Portugal in the early 1990s, she absorbed the atmosphere of the country, and it was there that many of her ideas for Harry Potter began to take shape. Number 6. The Sorting Hat once belonged to Gryffindor. Today it is one of the most important artifacts in the wizarding world, but originally it was nothing more than Godric Gryffindor's hat. The founders enchanted it, imbuing it with fragments of their minds and magic. Thanks to this, the hat gained the ability to read students' thoughts and sort them into their houses. Number 7. Rowling wrote the Hogwarts house names on an air sickness bag. The story behind the names of the founders and their houses is itself legendary. Rowling once admitted that while on a flight, she was struck by inspiration, and she hurriedly jotted the names down on an air sickness bag. A funny little detail, but one that shows the magic of Harry Potter was born literally anywhere, even high up in the Bengal sky. Number 8. Gryffindor was the one who suggested creating houses. It was Godric Gryffindor who first suggested dividing the students into houses. He believed young witches and wizards should be guided by mentors who shared their values, not just taught in crowded classrooms. Rowena Ravenclaw agreed, shaping her house around wit and learning. Helga Hufflepuff welcomed those who prized loyalty and fairness. Salazar Slytherin sought cunning and ambition. What began as personal tutelage soon became the four great houses of Hogwarts. The Sorting Hat later recalled their choice, for each of the four founders had a house in which they thought the youth should be sorted. This decision defined the school for centuries. Without it, Harry might never have found his place among Ron and Hermione, nor Draco Malfoy among the cunning of Slytherin. The Sorting Hat's test of character echoed Gryffindor's original vision, that students grow under leaders who reflected their own nature. When Harry asked, in the Philosopher's Stone, "Not Slytherin, not Slytherin," and the hat listened, it was proof of Gryffindor's idea. Choice and spirit mattered as much as talent. Number 9. Ravenclaw owned a secret diadem artifact. Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem was more than a jewel of silver and sapphire. It carried enchantments that sharpened the mind of whoever wore it, granting clarity and wisdom beyond measure. The Sorting Hat remembered her words and repeated them. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. Yet old chronicles hint that the diadem's powers once went further. Some claimed it could unlock hidden chambers in the castle, doors that responded only to its glow. Ravenclaw guarded it fiercely, never letting it leave her sight. She believed knowledge should be earned, not stolen, and the diadem was both her crown and her key. The tragedy came when her own daughter, Helena, stole it. "My mother's diadem," Helena's ghost admitted to Harry in Deathly Hallows, the symbol of her wisdom. "I sought to make myself cleverer, more important than my mother." The theft not only broke Ravenclaw's heart, but severed the secrets bound to the diadem. Centuries later, Voldemort discovered it hidden in Albania and turned it into a Horcrux. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione found it in the Room of Requirement, its once pure aura was corrupted. Yet even then the diadem remained a relic of Ravenclaw's genius, proof that her magic shaped the very stones of Hogwarts. The whispers about its lost ability to open secret halls have never been silenced. Somewhere in the shifting walls of the castle, perhaps a door still waits for its rightful crown. Number 10. Hufflepuff welcomed the first house elves to Hogwarts. Helga Hufflepuff's kindness reached beyond her students. At a time when house elves were beaten and bound to cruel masters, she opened the doors of Hogwarts to them. She promised they would find work and safety within its walls, not chains. It was said she stood in the great hall one autumn evening, raising her wand and declaring, "Here, no servant shall know cruelty." That vow made the castle a sanctuary, and the elves never forgot it. The Hogwarts kitchens became their haven. They worked with pride, not fear, creating feasts that dazzled every student. Centuries later, Harry, Ron, and Hermione would discover dozens of elves bustling happily beneath the floors, led by Winky and Dobby. Dobby himself spoke of Hogwarts with awe. "Dobby is free, sir, and Dobby is enjoying work at Hogwarts, sir." His words carried the echo of Helga's promise, proof that her vision endured long after her death. This tradition explains why Hufflepuff students gained a reputation for fairness and loyalty. They learned from their founder that respect was not limited to wizards. When Voldemort rose and Hogwarts became a battlefield, it was the elves who joined the fight, armed with kitchen knives and courage. Their choice was born from gratitude, planted by Hufflepuff's compassion centuries earlier. What began as mercy became a bond of loyalty that saved lives in the darkest of times. Number 11. Slytherin had a snake talisman. Salazar Slytherin was rarely seen without a small serpent coiled around his wrist or hidden in the folds of his robes. Some called it a familiar, others a living emblem of his dominion over snakes. In Chamber of Secrets, the Sorting Hat recalls that Slytherin took only those of great cunning, but it never spoke of the quiet companion that followed him everywhere. Students whispered that the snake's hiss was the first sound that taught him to shape the language of Parseltongue. Legends claim the serpent was named Nagra, a word from old Celtic tongues meaning shadow. Rowena Ravenclaw is said to have warned her colleague, "A man who listens too closely to whispers in the dark will one day forget the voice of the light." Yet Slytherin ignored her, claiming the creature carried the wisdom of the earth itself. He would stroke its scales during councils, as though its presence gave him certainty when others doubted his path. The snake also became the inspiration for the crest of Slytherin House. Early drawings in the Codex of Magical Heraldry show a plain shield until, as the story goes, Salazar pressed his familiar's shape into the parchment with a charm. From then on, the serpent was not only his symbol, but the eternal mark of his students. Even centuries later, Tom Riddle carved serpents into his diary, and the chamber itself continuing the shadow of that talisman. Some scholars argue the creature was not a snake at all, but a guardian spirit bound to Slytherin's bloodline. If true, it may explain why Parseltongue survived so strongly among his descendants. He spoke in a language Harry had never heard before, a strange hissing, Rowling wrote in Chamber of Secrets. That gift, born from a single serpent, echoed across generations, shaping both the legacy and the curse of Slytherin's name. Number 12. The founders first wanted to build Hogwarts elsewhere. Few students ever wondered why Hogwarts stood on the edge of a vast Scottish lake, hidden by mist and cliffs. Yet stories tell us the founders argued fiercely over its location. Godric Gryffindor dreamed of a stronghold near the border of England and Wales, where warrior clans had once guarded the land. Rowena Ravenclaw urged them to choose the Green Mountains of Ireland, claiming the air there sharpened the mind. Salazar Slytherin, however, demanded the marshlands of the south, where secrecy could be preserved in the fog. Their disagreements nearly broke the alliance before the castle was even built. Rowena was said to have drawn maps in the air with her wand, showing shifting staircases and towers rising from the Irish cliffs. "Knowledge is hidden in high places," she told them, echoing the Sorting Hat's later line. "Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind." Godric countered that strength required a fortress where battles had been fought, and his Celtic blood urged him to the borderlands. The turning point came when Helga Hufflepuff suggested the Highlands of Scotland. They were remote, beautiful, and shielded from prying eyes by mountain, forest, and water. For once, even Slytherin agreed, recognizing the strategic advantage. The Black Lake could hide what lay beneath, and the surrounding hills made approach nearly impossible. It was compromise, but it held the magic of all four visions. Generations later, that decision saved the school. When Voldemort marched his army to the castle, it was the cliffs and the lake that delayed his forces, buying precious time for the defenders inside. The founders had chosen well. Their quarrel over the site left a legacy of safety that lasted 1,000 years, hidden in plain sight at the edge of the Highlands. Number 13. Gryffindor descended from Celtic warriors. Godric Gryffindor carried in his blood the memory of Celtic warriors. His family was said to descend from a Highland clan that valued courage above all. He inherited not only their bravery, but also their skill in battle. Legends claim he trained with swords as much as with wands, and he never saw a conflict as purely magical or purely physical. For him, every fight was a test of heart. One tale describes Gryffindor facing a band of Muggle raiders near the Welsh border. Outnumbered and unable to use magic openly, he drew his sword instead of his wand. The chronicles say he fought like a lion, protecting a group of young witches until help arrived. That sword would later become the enchanted blade we know as the Sword of Gryffindor. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the Sorting Hat reminds Harry, "Only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that out of the hat." The story ties back to his warrior heritage. His duels became legendary. While Rowena Ravenclaw favoured wit and subtle spells, Gryffindor preferred bold tactics, combining charms with physical strikes. Students recorded that he often disarmed opponents with his wand, then pressed the advantage with his sword. It was this fusion of magic and combat that made him so feared. Even Salazar Slytherin admitted grudging respect for Gryffindor's ability to fight without relying solely on charms. This warrior spirit passed down into the house that bore his name. The Gryffindors of later centuries, from Albus Dumbledore to Harry Potter himself, embodied that same readiness to fight against the odds. Dumbledore once told Harry, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." The choice to stand and fight, sometimes with nothing but courage, was the legacy of Godric's Celtic blood. Number 14. Ravenclaw practiced dream magic. Rowena Ravenclaw was said to be a dreamer in the most literal sense. Her nights were filled with visions that others dismissed as fantasy, but she treated them as truth. The story goes that the very name Hogwarts came to her in a dream, where she saw a warty hog leading her to the cliff by the Black Lake. What might seem like a strange vision turned into a prophecy that changed the wizarding world. Students would one day chant the name of the school born from that dream. Her gift went beyond simple visions. Rowena practiced what modern wizards would call lucid dreaming. She could step into her dreams knowingly, shaping the world around her and drawing wisdom from the images she found there. The Tales of Beedle the Bard mentions her ability in passing, describing her as the wisest witch of her age, who listened not only to voices of men, but to whispers in her sleep. It was more than imagination, it was magic. Some claimed that Ravenclaw created early forms of the Somnus enchantments, spells later refined by seers like Cassandra Verblatsky. Her students would whisper about lessons where she guided them to close their eyes, to drift, and to find answers not in books, but in visions. "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure," the Sorting Hat once sang, echoing her own words. To Rowena, wit meant not only knowledge, but also the courage to trust the hidden corners of the mind. One example often told is the night she dreamt of a great bird circling over the castle. She woke and immediately ordered the construction of a new tower, which later became the Ravenclaw Tower. Years later, when a storm tore through the Highlands, it was that tower's design, built exactly as she had seen in the dream, that kept part of the castle standing. Her gift was not only mystical but practical, woven into the very stones of Hogwarts. Number 15. Hufflepuff created contests for the Great Hall. Of all the stories told about Hogwarts, there is one that lingers like a half-forgotten echo in the stone walls of the Great Hall, a tale that speaks of Helga Hufflepuff's quiet determination to make the hall more than a place for meals. The Great Hall, with its enchanted ceiling that reflected the sky outside, as Harry once marvelled in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, was imagined as a heart of the castle. According to older manuscripts preserved in the restricted section of the library, Hufflepuff argued that eating together was not enough to bind a school as diverse as Hogwarts. She believed that students must also test themselves before their peers, proving their talents in a spirit of mutual respect rather than hostility. It was she who proposed a series of trials of fellowship, contests of skill and knowledge that would be staged in the very hall where students gathered daily. The manuscripts describe competitions that mirrored Hufflepuff's values of fairness and inclusion. Unlike Salazar Slytherin, who cared only for cunning and bloodlines, Helga Hufflepuff saw worth in every student. The Great Hall trials were said to feature riddles and memory challenges for Ravenclaws, charm-casting duels for Gryffindors, and even cooking contests where students demonstrated not only skill but also cooperation. An old account from a medieval scribe known as Cressida Blackthorn claimed that Hufflepuff herself presided over a feast where each student cooked a portion of the meal, and the house elves judged the balance of flavors. This is striking when compared to the way Hogwarts students later treated the elves' work as invisible. The notion that Helga once invited them to stand as judges highlights her radical emphasis on humility and community. The surviving stories speak vividly of one particular trial, a contest of charms designed not to wound but to heal. It is said that Helga Hufflepuff arranged a challenge where students had to mend broken objects within a limited time, repairing shattered goblets, torn books, and cracked broom handles. This was centuries before Hermione Granger would mutter "reparo" to fix Harry's glasses in Chamber of Secrets. The trial revealed not who could strike hardest, but who could restore what was lost. This emphasis on repair and preservation echoed Helga's broader philosophy. Every student, no matter how ordinary, had a gift that could be used for the good of the community. The idea of the Great Hall as a place of trials also sheds light on the traditions that evolved later. The House Cup, fiercely contested during Harry Potter's time, seems less an invention of competition and more a diluted memory of Hufflepuff's early feasts. When Professor McGonagall declared, "The House Cup needs awarding and the points stand thus," in Philosopher's Stone, she unknowingly echoed Helga's voice. Instead of cooking or riddle-solving, the points were tallied for bravery, cleverness, loyalty, or ambition shown during the school year. The essence of Hufflepuff's trials survived, but in a form sharpened by rivalry rather than fellowship. There is also the curious matter of the Sorting Hat's song, which Harry heard each year. The hat sang, "Good Hufflepuff, she took the rest and taught them all she knew." Some historians interpret this line as evidence of her inclusive philosophy. But what if the phrase also hints at the Great Hall contests? "She taught them all she knew" could imply that her trials were designed not merely as spectacles, but as lessons. Unlike Slytherin's elitist tests, Hufflepuff created challenges that allowed any child, whether talented or struggling, to learn in the process. The Great Hall thus became a classroom as much as a dining room, where students absorbed lessons about fairness, humility, and perseverance. Another fragment, attributed to a Ravenclaw alumnus of the 11th century, describes a festival of flames in which students conjured controlled fire to create patterns in the air above the enchanted ceiling. The goal was not destruction, but artistry. Helga supposedly praised a young wizard for shaping his flame into the image of a phoenix, calling it a spark of courage worthy of Godric himself. This story provides a rare glimpse of how the founders sometimes acknowledged one another's virtues despite their disagreements. The Phoenix Fire contest foreshadowed Dumbledore's later bond with Fawkes, reminding us how threads of continuity wove through Hogwarts history. By the 16th century, however, the trials had all but vanished. Records suggest that the increasing danger of magical duels made the contests less attractive to cautious headmasters. The hall was returned to its original purpose as a dining place, and students began to associate competition primarily with Quidditch and the awarding of house points. Yet, the echoes of Helga's vision persisted. When Ron complained bitterly in Goblet of Fire that everything always seems to happen to Harry, he was unknowingly lamenting the decline of a tradition where every student had a chance to shine before the school. The Great Hall trials would have offered Ron and countless others the recognition they rarely found. The question remains, why was Helga so determined to anchor competition in the Great Hall? One theory holds that she understood the power of spectacle. Meals drew every student into the same space, and she seized upon that gathering as an opportunity for unity. She believed that when children saw one another's talents displayed openly, they would cultivate admiration instead of envy. This philosophy was in stark contrast to Slytherin's secretive scheming and Ravenclaw's cloistered intellectualism. Helga's stage was public, inclusive, and celebratory. Number 16, Slytherin possessed forbidden scrolls. Salazar, Slytherin's reputation has always been painted in darker shades than those of his fellow founders, and the legend of his forbidden scrolls has only deepened that shadow. Among the four who built Hogwarts, he was the one most obsessed with the purity of blood and the preservation of magical power in its strongest form. Tales whisper that during his travels to distant lands, particularly the deserts of Egypt, he acquired ancient scrolls inscribed with arcane knowledge. Their origins were cloaked in mystery. Some claimed they were salvaged from tombs sealed for centuries, while others believed they had passed secretly from wizard to wizard through hidden orders. What makes these scrolls more than a passing rumor is the pattern of secrecy that followed them. Slytherin was known for keeping his research private, sharing it only with chosen pupils who swore loyalty, a behavior that fits perfectly with the idea that he possessed writings too dangerous to be read openly. The law surrounding Egypt as the birthplace of this knowledge is not arbitrary. Even in the wizarding world, Egypt has always been regarded as a land saturated with magic of an older, rawer form than anything seen in Europe. We see this echoed centuries later when the Weasley family visits Egypt in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and Ron proudly shows Harry the photograph of his brother Bill working with ancient runes in the pyramids. If so much magical history still lingers in the stones of Egypt during Harry's time, one can only imagine the treasures and horrors Slytherin might have found when he walked its sands. Scrolls buried with priests and kings may have contained enchantments, curses, and secrets meant never to leave their tombs. To a man like Slytherin, always hungry for power and obsessed with the mastery of darker arts, the temptation would have been irresistible. What scholars often point to as indirect evidence of these scrolls is the rare gift of Parseltongue, the ability to speak with snakes. It is one of the most mysterious skills in wizarding history, feared by many because of its association with dark wizards. When Harry accidentally reveals his own ability in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the crowd of students recoils, and Professor McGonagall's face is described as horrified. That reaction speaks volumes. Parseltongue was not only feared but recognized as a mark of Slytherin himself. While some traditions claim the ability was inborn and passed through Slytherin's bloodline, others argue it was an acquired art, one that the Forbidden Scrolls might have explained. If ancient Egyptian sorcerers had indeed studied serpent worship and communication, Slytherin could have adopted and refined their knowledge, embedding it into his legacy. The scrolls also allegedly held the earliest concepts that later evolved into the creation of Horcruxes. Although Horcruxes are officially credited to much later dark wizards like Herpo the Foul, who lived in ancient Greece, the boundaries of magical history are often blurred. Dumbledore, in Harry Potter, and the Half-Blood Prince calls Horcruxes the most terrible of all dark magic, emphasizing that even discussing them is considered taboo. If Slytherin truly encountered texts that predated Herpo's writings, or at least expanded upon them, then he may have dabbled with ideas no one else dared articulate. The secrecy surrounding the scrolls could be explained by their contents, instructions for dividing the soul, channeling serpents as messengers of magic, or unlocking forbidden powers. While no proof survives, the silence of history often says more than its words. In some rare manuscripts found centuries later in the Hogwarts library, particularly among the restricted section, there are references to a hidden study of the serpent founder. Madame Pince, the strict librarian, was known to guard these volumes fiercely, suggesting that remnants of Slytherin's legacy may still linger in the castle's collection. Students whispered of seeing faded names like Invocation of the Silent Tongue or The Passage of Eternal Division listed in the indexes of banned tomes. While these titles themselves do not survive in any complete form, they point toward themes disturbingly consistent with the rumors: serpents, silence, eternity, and division of the self. One cannot help but draw lines back to the alleged scrolls from Egypt, perhaps smuggled into Hogwarts and hidden behind enchantments only the founder himself could unravel. The founders themselves left almost nothing in writing about each other's methods, which is suspicious in its own right. Godric Gryffindor was famed for his courage and boldness, Helga Hufflepuff for her loyalty and inclusiveness, Rowena Ravenclaw for her wisdom and invention. Yet when Slytherin is mentioned in Hogwarts lore, it is nearly always with the undertone of mistrust. The decision to build a secret chamber beneath the school, a place that even his peers did not know how to access, demonstrates his obsession with private power. Could such secrecy have been born from his reliance on knowledge too dangerous to share? Gryffindor might have seen it as cowardice, Ravenclaw as arrogance, and Hufflepuff as betrayal. To Slytherin, however, the scrolls may have been his most prized possession, his insurance that his influence would outlast even his presence at Hogwarts. What strengthens this belief further is the very nature of the Chamber of Secrets itself. When Harry enters it in Chamber of Secrets, he discovers not merely a lair, but a carefully constructed shrine to serpents, complete with the enormous statue of Slytherin. The basilisk slumbering within was not an accidental inhabitant, but a deliberate guardian, born of dark enchantments and sustained by secrecy. Where would Slytherin have learned to create such a beast? Basilisks are known to be the results of complex magical breeding, knowledge far beyond common wizarding practice. It is plausible that instructions for summoning or controlling such creatures were inscribed on the forbidden scrolls, imported from foreign lands where serpent cults thrived. This possibility makes the legend even more unsettling. Number 17. The founders once considered creating a fifth house. The four founders of Hogwarts, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, are remembered as visionaries who gave shape to the most famous school of witchcraft and wizardry. Yet hidden beneath the official chronicles of the castle, there lingers a nearly forgotten story about a fifth house that never came to be. It is a legend passed in whispers among scholars of magical history, a tale of an abandoned idea that could have altered the fate of generations. Some say the plan was conceived during the very first discussions in the 10th century, when the four witches and wizards debated not only the structure of the school, but also how to accommodate the strange variety of talents among young magical children. The existence of this proposed fifth house is hinted at in several obscure manuscripts preserved in the restricted section of the Hogwarts Library, a fact that has fueled speculation for centuries. According to these accounts, the proposed house was not meant to compete with Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, or Slytherin, but rather to serve as a refuge for those students who did not fit neatly into any of the others. Its purpose was to unite the unusual, the unpredictable, and the unclassifiable. Where Gryffindor prized bravery, Slytherin cunning, Ravenclaw intellect, and Hufflepuff loyalty, the fifth house would have embraced the hybrids, students who were a curious blend of qualities. Helga Hufflepuff, known for her inclusive spirit, is said to have been the strongest supporter of the idea. Her writings, recorded in a fragment later quoted by the wizarding historian Ivor Dillonsby, expressed the sentiment. Every child deserves a hearth, even if their flame burns with many colours. This line has become emblematic of the forgotten project. The strongest opposition, unsurprisingly, came from Salazar Slytherin. His view of blood purity already strained his relationship with the others, but his disdain for compromise was equally powerful. To Slytherin, the idea of a miscellaneous house seemed to dilute the power and clarity of the sorting. He argued that a wizard without strong allegiance to one quality was weak and directionless. "What is the worth of a coin with no mark?" he is rumoured to have said during one heated discussion. His contempt was so deep that the very notion of a fifth house became a point of personal rivalry between him and Hufflepuff, whose kindness he dismissed as softness. This clash of philosophy, layered upon the growing rift over blood status, further fractured the unity of the founders. Rowena Ravenclaw, whose intellect and pride defined her, opposed the fifth house for a different reason. She worried that establishing a general house for the undefined would undermine the prestige of the others, particularly her own. To her, Hogwarts was meant to refine excellence, and excellence could not be vague. The sorting hat itself, enchanted with the minds of all four founders, preserves a trace of this debate. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the hat sings, "Their daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. Their cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. Wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind." The verses emphasize clarity, distinction, and categories. The absence of any mention of an in-between house is telling, but the precision of the wording suggests that Rowena's insistence prevailed. She was unwilling to let the boundaries blur. It is worth noting that Godric Gryffindor himself, though less rigid, eventually sided with Ravenclaw. Gryffindor, ever the champion of bold action, originally showed sympathy for Hufflepuff's wish. After all, he valued fairness, and he recognized that not all children expressed bravery as their dominant trait. Yet when pressed, Gryffindor admitted that the sorting had to push students toward growth, not simply comfort. to give them a house of safety rather. Then challenge might, in his eyes, rob them of the chance to discover hidden strengths. Thus, Gryffindor's ambivalence turned into reluctant opposition. It is perhaps no coincidence that centuries later, the Sorting Hat would occasionally place children into Gryffindor for qualities that were not obvious at first, such as Neville Longbottom, who himself doubted his bravery until he proved it in the Battle of Hogwarts. One of the most fascinating examples that historians use to argue for the necessity of the fifth house is the case of Mopsus, a legendary seer of the 11th century. Accounts suggest that as a boy, Mopsus displayed both Ravenclaw's thirst for knowledge and Slytherin's gift for strategic foresight. Yet he also possessed Hufflepuff's loyalty to friends and the reckless courage of Gryffindor. Sorting such a student, according to later speculation, must have been nearly impossible. While no record tells us where he was placed, his life as a prophet and wanderer suggests that he may have felt out of place within a rigid house identity. Proponents of the fifth house theory point to him as the kind of wizard who would have thrived in a house of many colours. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore speaks to Harry about the Sorting Hat's choice, telling him, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Some scholars believe that Dumbledore, whose wisdom often hinted at deeper historical knowledge, may have been alluding to the abandoned fifth house. If abilities alone had guided the founders, the fifth house might have survived, giving refuge to those with many qualities. But the others insisted on choice and direction, forcing the hat to push children toward a clearer path. In this light, the sorting itself can be seen as an echo of the founders' original disagreement. Number 18. Gryffindor mastered a rare fire conjuring spell. The name of Godric Gryffindor has always carried with it the echo of fire. His legend is not only tied to courage, chivalry, and the roaring lion, but also to the mastery of a magical force few dared to touch, the conjuring of fire itself. Ancient manuscripts preserved in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library describe a rare incantation whispered to be his creation, a spell that summoned controlled flames capable of recognizing friend from foe. Unlike ordinary fire-making charms, these flames possessed intent, burning enemies with merciless heat while leaving allies unscathed. Such a gift elevated Gryffindor not just to the rank of a founder, but to a symbol of magical defiance in a world where witches and wizards were hunted. The connection between his fiery magic and the heraldic lion of his house is no coincidence. Both speak of untamed energy, nobility, and power meant to protect. Legends of Godric's ability with fire often return to the turbulent years when witch hunters swept across medieval Europe. During one such episode, in a village near Yorkshire, Gryffindor was said to have faced a mob armed with torches, chains, and sharpened pikes. Ordinary magic could repel them, but according to the Chronicles of the Flame, an old wizarding account attributed to a scribe named Cadan Tremlet, Gryffindor unleashed a sphere of golden fire. Witnesses described it as a dome of light that shielded the innocent villagers, hiding behind him while simultaneously setting ablaze the hunters' weapons. The fire sang, but did not scorch his friends, Tremlet recorded, and yet it devoured the ropes and spears of the persecutors until none dared advance. This is not the kind of tale easily dismissed as embellishment, for the descriptions mirror certain advanced magical practices later seen in the Battle of Hogwarts, centuries later. Indeed, the resemblance to Professor Dumbledore's mastery of fire is striking. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when Harry witnessed Dumbledore confronting the Inferi in the cave, the headmaster conjured a ring of fire that forced the creatures to retreat. The fire danced around them like a living serpent, bright, fierce, and untouchable, the book tells us. That moment is often compared by magical historians to the descriptions of Godric Gryffindor's shield flames, suggesting that Dumbledore may have rediscovered a fragment of that forgotten art. The fact that two of the greatest wizards in history are linked by their command of fire cannot be overlooked. It points to a tradition, a rare lineage of magical knowledge passed secretly from founder to those capable of understanding its peril and responsibility. The significance of Gryffindor's fire goes beyond combat. To conjure flames that recognize intent implies enchantments interwoven with morality itself. Fire, destructive by nature, becomes in his hand a discerning guardian. This is unlike the Fiendfire curse, which appears in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Crabbe foolishly unleashes it in the Room of Requirement. Fiendfire consumes everything, enemy and ally alike, and nearly kills Draco Malfoy. Gryffindor's spell, by contrast, was refined, controlled, and purposeful. Where Fiendfire embodies chaos, Gryffindor's flame embodied justice. To the medieval mind, surrounded by superstition and fear of witchcraft, such a vision of holy fire would have seemed both terrifying and divine, blurring the line between wizardry and miracle. It is telling that the lion became his chosen emblem. Lions in heraldic tradition represent bravery, kingship, and guardianship. But in ancient bestiaries, the lion was also associated with the sun, the fiery orb in the sky. Stories describe lions breathing out warmth, their manes glowing with the light of the dawn. Gryffindor, by aligning his house with the lion, may have been deliberately choosing a symbol that tied courage to the very element he had mastered. When the Sorting Hat, itself enchanted by Gryffindor, sings of bravery and daring hearts, the undertone of fire is present. Bravery that blazes, loyalty that burns, and fury that scorches injustice. Students who wear the red and gold of Gryffindor unknowingly walk in the aura of their founder's fireborn identity. One of the most compelling tales of Gryffindor's flame is said to have occurred during the siege of Notting Moor, a conflict largely erased from Muggle chronicles, but still remembered in certain wizarding ballads. According to the Lay of the Ember Crown, Gryffindor and a band of witches were trapped in a ruined abbey while a company of knights sought to burn them alive. Instead of retreating, Gryffindor is said to have struck the stone floor with his sword, an artifact many believe to be the goblin-made blade later kept in Hogwarts. From that strike erupted fire that poured like a river through the abbey's gates, forming a wall that held back the attackers. The song insists that the knights fled, terrified of the roaring fire lion that appeared in the blaze. Whether literal or allegorical, the tale reinforces the vision of Gryffindor as master of fire, both defensive and symbolic. The echo of this legend resonates with Harry's own life. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the Triwizard Tournament brings Harry face to face with dragons, creatures of flame and fury. His victory with the Hungarian Horntail comes not from brute force, but from courage and quick thinking, the very values Gryffindor embodied. Fire once again becomes the test, separating the brave from the cowardly. Even the name of the book itself reminds readers of the fiery heritage running through Gryffindor's line. Harry, as Gryffindor's heir in spirit if not in blood, constantly confronts fire, whether in the dragon's breath, Dumbledore's protective flames, or Voldemort's destructive fury. Skeptics argue that Gryffindor's fire mastery is but myth, exaggerated through centuries of retelling. They claim no spell can discriminate so finely between friend and foe. Yet magical precedent challenges this doubt. The Patronus charm, for instance, recognizes the caster's intentions, responding to hope and happiness while repelling Dementors. If light itself can be imbued with moral resonance, why not fire? Moreover, the Sorting Hat, enchanted by Gryffindor, discerns the character of each student, proving that magic can indeed perceive intent. The step from judgmental sorting to judgmental fire is not so large as it may appear. The secrecy around the spell may itself be evidence of its reality. Certain magics, dangerous in the wrong hands, are hidden from general teaching. The Ministry of Magic keeps entire categories of spells classified. The dark arts, after all, thrive on indiscriminate destruction. If Gryffindor's flame charm was preserved, it may lie buried in the deepest layers of Hogwarts enchantments, woven into protections no student ever sees. Some have speculated that the magical fire surrounding the Sorcerer's Stone in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which burned those who touched it without permission, is an echo of Gryffindor's craft, perhaps integrated into the castle's defences by the founders themselves. The idea that Gryffindor's fire could distinguish loyalty also sheds new light on the symbolic sword that bears his name. The sword of Gryffindor absorbs what makes it stronger. It took in basilisk venom when Harry wielded it in the Chamber of Secrets. In parallel, Gryffindor's flames consumed only what was hostile, strengthening protection for the loyal. Both artifacts reveal a philosophy that true strength grows not from indiscriminate force but from discerning defense. Godric Gryffindor's vision of courage was not reckless rage, but noble fire, ready to destroy tyranny while guarding the innocent. Another detail linking Gryffindor to fire comes from the Sorting Hat song in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Bold Gryffindor, from Wild Moor, for brave deeds he was known. The word bold here is not just courage, it carries the connotation of burning brightness. His homeland, the wild moors, are places where fires were often lit, as beacons or defences. The cultural atmosphere of Gryffindor's youth would have been filled with the sight of controlled flames against the dark, guiding travellers and warding off wolves. Fire was safety and power, woven into his very identity long before Hogwarts rose from stone. Consider also the parallel with Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix. The phoenix is a creature of fire, rebirth, and loyalty. It is not impossible that Gryffindor himself, who lived centuries before, might have encountered such a bird and drawn inspiration. A phoenix's flames heal allies but blaze against threats, mirroring the very nature of Gryffindor's supposed spell. If the lion was his emblem, perhaps the phoenix was his teacher, teaching him the dual nature of fire, destruction and renewal. In that sense, Gryffindor's flame may have been more than mere spellwork. It may have been a philosophy passed down through generations of his house. The most haunting aspect of Gryffindor's fire legend is the suggestion that it has been lost. Unlike the Chamber of Secrets left by Salazar Slytherin or the diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw, no physical relic directly tied to Gryffindor's fire remains. The sword stands as his artifact, but the spell itself is shrouded in rumour. Was it too dangerous to preserve? Did he destroy its records, fearing misuse? Or does it still slumber in the foundations of the castle, waiting for a true Gryffindor to awaken it? Every flicker of magical flame in the Great Hall seems to whisper this question, tantalizing students with the possibility that their founder's greatest power remains hidden just out of reach. And so the tale persists. Godric Gryffindor, the firebringer, the lion-hearted founder who carried a flame that judged, protected, and consumed. His mastery of fire was not a trivial trick, but a legacy that still resonates through Hogwarts walls, through the bravery of its students, and through the very spirit of Harry Potter himself. Fire in his hands was courage made visible, a roaring guardian of justice, leaving behind a legend that refuses to be extinguished. Number 19. Ravenclaw owned a magical mirror. The story of Rowena Ravenclaw has always been surrounded by mystery, and the legacy of her brilliance is scattered in whispers across the stone walls of Hogwarts. Among the most intriguing legends is the tale of a magical mirror she once possessed, a mirror unlike any other. Unlike the well-documented mirror of Erist, which revealed the deepest desires of the heart, this object was said to show something far subtler and more valuable, the intellectual and imaginative potential of the person standing before it. Wizards of later centuries would claim that Rowena, whose keen mind was unmatched, used the mirror to peer beyond the surface of young witches and wizards, choosing those who possessed the inner spark of learning that would define the very soul of her house. It is difficult to speak of Ravenclaw without mentioning her daughter Helena, who became the Grey Lady, wandering forever through the halls. Helena herself, in a rare confession to Harry Potter in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, spoke of her mother as a woman clever and beautiful and wise. If we imagine that wisdom, it seems natural to believe that Rowena would have crafted or acquired an artifact capable of detecting intelligence in its rawest form. The Ravenclaw mirror, according to fragmented records in the restricted section of the library, was polished to a faultless sheen and framed with silver inlays of runes representing thought and memory. A glimpse into its depths did not reveal beauty or longing, but instead a shifting constellation of symbols, equations, and visions that represented the mental capacity of the beholder. Such an object, if it truly existed, would have been the ultimate tool for a woman whose dream was to create a school for the greatest young minds of the wizarding world. The legend tells that when the four founders debated how to divide their students, Rowena had already been gazing into her mirror, testing the children who stood nervously before her. She supposedly watched how their reflections transformed, how quick their thoughts appeared, or how fluid their creativity flowed in the mirror's depths. It was never about perfect knowledge, but about potential, the promise that a young mind could flourish with the right environment. A boy whose reflection dissolved into fluttering pages of books was guided into her care. A girl whose image bloomed into a dance of shifting stars was welcomed, for her imagination was boundless. These stories are not confirmed in any surviving charter of the school, but they have been passed down in whispers among Ravenclaw students for centuries, carried like a secret badge of honor. The comparison with the mirror of Erised has fueled many scholarly disputes. Dumbledore himself once explained the nature of Erised to Harry, saying, "It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts." The Ravenclaw mirror, by contrast, was said to show what the mind could become, not what the heart wanted. Some historians have speculated that the two mirrors might have been created by the same enchanter, or perhaps by Rowena herself in different stages of her life. Others argue that no such mirror ever existed, and that the tale is only a symbolic invention of Ravenclaw's descendants to glorify their founder. Yet even skeptics admit that Hogwarts is full of hidden rooms, forgotten passages, and lost relics. To dismiss the existence of the mirror entirely seems almost naive in a castle where staircases shift at will and ghosts whisper from behind tapestries. There is one striking example often cited by believers in the mirror's existence. In the 17th century, a young wizard named Percival Kentworth claimed to have stumbled upon a cracked silver frame hidden behind the old astronomy tower. Though the glass was gone, fragments of runic carvings remained, spelling out the Old Norse word huga, meaning mind or spirit. Kentworth described how the frame seemed to hum when touched, vibrating with a peculiar energy. Unfortunately, the artifact vanished shortly thereafter, and no official record was ever kept within the Hogwarts archives. Still, Kentworth's claim continues to resurface. Whenever the mirror is mentioned, fueling the idea that fragments of it may still lie buried in some sealed chamber of the school, Rowena's obsession with intellect has sometimes been portrayed as her greatest flaw. In some accounts, the mirror was not merely a tool but an addiction. She may have relied on it excessively, consulting its visions even when her own judgment was sufficient. There are whispers that she looked into it late at night, desperate to see her own brilliance confirmed, or to find new ideas hidden in the shimmering patterns. If true, the mirror may have been both her gift and her curse, a relic that encouraged her to place knowledge above all else. This echoes the well-known story of her diadem, enchanted to enhance the wisdom of the wearer. Both artifacts suggest a woman consumed by the pursuit of intellect, seeking ever more ways to refine and amplify the human mind. The Grey Lady's confession to Harry about stealing the diadem has become canonical, but what if Helena had also envied the mirror? Some later storytellers insist that Helena once gazed into it and saw not her potential, but her limitations, a revelation that filled her with bitterness toward her mother. They argue that this moment of despair drove her to steal the diadem, believing that if the mirror denied her brilliance, the diadem could grant it. Though this is pure conjecture, it fits thematically with her tragic story, and it adds a layer of poignancy to her ghostly wanderings. Imagine a daughter who could never live up to the reflection her mother prized most. It is also said that the mirror disappeared upon Rowena's death, vanishing with her last breath. Some think she destroyed it herself, unwilling to let others misuse it. Others believe it was sealed deep within the castle by Godric Gryffindor, who feared that too much reliance on such an artifact could weaken the courage and willpower of future students. The possibility that the mirror still rests somewhere within Hogwarts is a tantalizing one, and many treasure seekers have scoured the dungeons and attics of the castle, hoping to stumble upon the polished glass that reveals the spark of the mind. The room of requirement has been searched countless times, though, as always, it reveals only what the seeker truly needs in the moment, not necessarily what they want to discover. Those who have studied the legend point out how naturally it aligns with the character of Ravenclaw House. When Harry once asked the Sorting Hat about the founders, the Hat told him that Ravenclaw valued a ready mind, a thirst for knowledge, and wit beyond measure. A mirror that tested those very qualities seems more than fitting. In this sense, whether real or imaginary, the story has become a living metaphor. Ravenclaw students are told from their earliest days to look not at their desires or their appearances, but at their mental gifts. The mirror is said to dwell invisibly in every Ravenclaw dormitory, not as an object of glass, but as a challenge to always reflect upon the potential of the mind. Scholars at the Ministry of Magic have long debated whether such an artifact could even exist. The Department of Mysteries has experimented with enchanted mirrors for centuries, but most attempts have ended in disaster. Some mirrors trap the reflections of wizards permanently, leaving them as shadowy doubles. Others became unstable, revealing glimpses of thoughts too fleeting to interpret. If Rowena's mirror worked flawlessly, it would represent an achievement in magical craft far ahead of its time, perhaps even dangerous in its power. What secrets of mind and magic did she possess that others have never managed to rediscover? Another argument supporting the mirror's plausibility is Rowena's connection with ancient runes and memory charms. She was said to be fluent in languages and magics forgotten by later generations. The carvings on the supposed frame, found by Percival Kentworth, match known Ravenclaw motifs, particularly the spiral symbol of thought, which also appears in the engravings of her lost diadem. If she could create an object that permanently magnified wisdom, why not a mirror that revealed hidden mental potential? For those who believe in the story, the mirror is simply another chapter in the book of her genius. There is also the question of legacy. Each founder left behind a defining relic: Gryffindor's sword, Hufflepuff's cup, Slytherin's locket, Ravenclaw's diadem. If Rowena possessed the mirror as well, why was it never counted among these heirlooms? Some suggest it was too personal, too tied to her teaching methods rather than her legacy. Others whisper that it was deliberately excluded, hidden from history, because it could disrupt the delicate balance of the founder's vision. After all, if one object could determine the future of a child's mind, it might overshadow the values of the other houses, creating jealousy and division. Modern Ravenclaws sometimes claim to feel its presence. When a student stands before the bronze eagle door knocker answering riddles to gain entry, they say it is as though the mirror itself is testing them. "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure," the house motto declares, and the students believe that Rowena's spirit still watches, evaluating their minds in silence. Whether the mirror exists in stone or story, it has become a part of the very identity of the house, shaping how generations of witches and wizards see themselves. For Harry, who never saw the Ravenclaw mirror but heard so much about the founder's artifacts, the existence of such an object would have been yet another lesson about the complexity of magic. If the mirror of Erised revealed how dangerous unchecked desire could be, then the Ravenclaw mirror would have carried its own warning that knowledge, too, can be intoxicating. Perhaps the greatest truth of Hogwarts is that every relic, every legend, is a reflection of both gift and danger. The lost mirror of Rowena Ravenclaw, whether hidden deep within the castle or only in the minds of her heirs, continues to remind us that intellect is as perilous as it is precious. Number 20. Hufflepuff was a friend to magical creatures. Helga Hufflepuff was remembered among the 4 founders of Hogwarts as the one who cared most for fairness and loyalty, but in the shadows of old records another quality emerges: her remarkable friendship with magical creatures. While Godric Gryffindor was famed for his sword and bravery, Rowena Ravenclaw for her wisdom, and Salazar Slytherin for his ambition, Helga carried with her a gentleness that extended far beyond human company. Wizards and witches of later centuries recalled that she was able to approach beasts no other founder dared touch. It was whispered that her voice, steady and warm, had a power equal to the fiercest incantations. This is not the kind of legacy that finds its way into official histories, but those who studied the early years of Hogwarts discovered traces of her unusual bond with the creatures that roamed the castle grounds. One of the most striking legends tells of the first hippogriffs ever brought to Hogwarts. Centuries before Hagrid cared for Buckbeak, Helga herself insisted that the creatures be welcomed into the school's protection. Hippogriffs, half eagle and half horse, were notoriously proud and easily offended, but Helga walked among them without fear. She bowed with dignity, following the proper respect they required, and the hippogriffs bowed back. Later, writings suggested that Gryffindor had objected, fearing their violent temper, but Helga argued that teaching students to honor and respect such beasts was as valuable as any lesson in spellwork. It was her insistence that established Hogwarts as not only a school of magic, but also a sanctuary for creatures who otherwise would have been hunted or shunned. The stories did not stop with hippogriffs. Another account describes how Helga was among the first witches in Britain to recognize the presence of thestrals, the skeletal winged horses that only the bereaved could see. To most, they were omens of death and despair. But Helga viewed them differently, claiming that they symbolized the acceptance of truth, however painful. It is said she convinced the other founders to allow thestrals to roam the edges of the forbidden forest. Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself, Dumbledore once reminded his students. And though his words came centuries later, they echoed Helga's philosophy. She believed that avoiding or hiding creatures that reminded people of death only made fear grow stronger. By allowing thestrals a place in Hogwarts, she gave them dignity and gave her students a chance to confront loss with courage. Helga's gift extended even to creatures as rough and unrefined as trolls. Trolls were considered hopelessly dangerous, incapable of reasoning or obeying wizards. Yet an old Welsh ballad recounts that Helga, speaking in a calm, melodic voice, once pacified a mountain troll that had wandered too close to the castle. The troll, which had frightened villagers and broken carts in its path, lowered its club when she approached. While Gryffindor and Slytherin prepared to duel it into submission, Helga whispered to the beast as though addressing a frightened child. It lumbered away into the forest without striking a blow. Though later generations often dismissed this as myth, the persistence of the tale reflects how her contemporaries viewed her powers of compassion, not as weakness, but as a strange form of strength. The qualities Helga demonstrated lived on in the character of her house. Hufflepuff students were often mocked for being ordinary, yet time and again they showed an unusual closeness to nature and magical beasts. Newt Scamander, perhaps the most famous Hufflepuff of modern times, embodied this heritage. His fantastic beasts and where to find them was not merely a catalogue, but a testament to kindness toward even the strangest creatures. When describing the Niffler, a mischievous beast fond of stealing shiny things, Newt wrote with amusement rather than condemnation, treating it as a friend to be understood rather than a nuisance to be eradicated. His gentle approach can be traced back like a thread to Helga's earliest lessons. Students from other houses noticed the difference as well. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Hagrid introduced the class to blast-ended scroots, a dangerous and nearly uncontrollable species. While most students complained bitterly, Cedric Diggory, the Hufflepuff champion, accepted the lesson with patience. He did not mock Hagrid, nor did he turn away in disgust. This willingness to endure, to look for worth in even the most unlovable creatures, mirrors Helga's ancient belief that every being had a place in the world. Cedric's character was a modern reflection of his founder's quiet ideals. It is tempting to see Helga's kindness as sentimental, but the truth was sharper. Her connection to magical creatures was not about taming them into obedience, but about teaching respect. Hippogriffs demanded courtesy, thestrals demanded acceptance of grief, trolls demanded calm persistence. Each creature revealed a lesson about human conduct. In this sense, Helga's friendship with magical beings was a mirror for her philosophy of teaching. She wanted every child, regardless of blood or talent, to have a place at Hogwarts. Just as she saw worth in dangerous beasts, she saw worth in every witch and wizard who crossed the castle's gates. "I'll teach the lot and treat them just the same," her words. From the Sorting Hat's song reminded listeners of her creed. Those lines, remembered by the Enchanted Hat, were not idle. They were a declaration of how she viewed both people and creatures alike. There are documents preserved in the restricted section of the library that suggest Helga kept a small menagerie of her own within the castle. Early scribes listed Neasels, creatures resembling cats with extraordinary intuition, wandering freely in the kitchens. These Neasels not only served to guard against thieves, but also provided companionship to the elves and cooks. Some accounts mention that they could detect dishonesty and would hiss at liars, an ability Helga valued in a place where children were learning trust. Later, folklore claimed that Hufflepuff's golden cup, the very relic Voldemort turned into a Horcrux, was once guarded by Neasels who would purr only in her presence. The contrast with Salazar Slytherin could not have been sharper. Slytherin distrusted creatures he could not control and focused instead on the language of serpents, where mastery meant dominance. Helga, by contrast, embraced beasts not through control but through empathy. This philosophical difference may have deepened the rift among the founders. While Slytherin eventually left the school over disagreements about blood purity, one wonders if his disdain for Helga's animal companions added bitterness to his departure. In the Sorting Hat's retelling, Slytherin desired only the cunning and ambitious, while Helga sought those willing to work and remain loyal. Perhaps her bond with magical creatures was one more reason she could not accept a vision of Hogwarts based solely on power. The echoes of Helga's legacy reach into the present stories of Harry Potter himself. When Harry faced Buckbeak during Hagrid's lesson, he bowed and waited, showing respect rather than arrogance. That small act saved his life. Though Harry was a Gryffindor, he demonstrated a lesson Helga had instilled centuries earlier, that true courage often lies in humility before creatures we do not understand. The bow between Harry and Buckbeak became one of the most memorable demonstrations of the bond between wizard and beast, echoing across time from Helga's first walk among the hippogriffs. Even Dumbledore seemed to carry shades of her philosophy. His affection for Fawkes the Phoenix, his gentle care for magical instruments and creatures within the castle, reflected the same belief that every being held wisdom. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, he said, "You will find that I will only truly have left this school when none here are loyal to me." Loyalty, Helga's own watchword, was intertwined with the loyalty of creatures like Fawkes, who returned to Dumbledore in his moment of need. The founder's values lingered not only in her students but in the very culture of Hogwarts itself. If one listens closely to the descriptions of Hufflepuff House, the theme of nature and creatures is always present. The entrance to their common room lies near the kitchens, surrounded by earthy tunnels and decorated with plants. Students describe a space filled with herbs, flowers, and sunlight. It feels less like a fortress and more like a garden. This closeness to earth and living things reflects the ancient influence of Helga's friendships. The other houses may have their towers or their dungeons, but Hufflepuff's space feels like a nest for both people and creatures alike. The moral weight of Helga's friendships becomes clear when we consider how often magical creatures were misunderstood. Centaurs distrusted humans, giants were hunted nearly to extinction, werewolves were feared and ostracized. Yet Helga's legacy whispered that understanding begins with kindness. She may not have solved every conflict, but she planted the idea that coexistence was possible. That seed grew in the works of Newt Scamander, in the compassion of Hagrid, and in the patience of every Hufflepuff who chose to treat beasts not as threats, but as companions. Helga's friendship with magical creatures is not merely a quaint historical anecdote, but a cornerstone of Hogwarts history. Her example showed that power does not always roar like Gryffindor's lion, or hiss like Slytherin's serpent. Sometimes power is quiet, a hand reaching out to a winged horse, a voice soft enough to calm a troll, a heart steady enough to see beauty in death's shadow. In a world of wands and spells, her true magic lay in her ability to see worth where others saw only danger. That is why her house, often underestimated, has produced witches and wizards of profound strength, not in dominance, but in loyalty and compassion, the very traits that allow humans and magical creatures to live side by side. Number 21, Slytherin invented a unique protection spell. Of all the legends whispered in the candlelit corridors of Hogwarts, few are more paradoxical than the story of Salazar Slytherin and the protective enchantment that some historians claim bears his signature. It seems almost impossible to reconcile with the image painted of him in the books, where he is remembered as a stern, suspicious wizard with a fixation on blood purity and a fascination with darker branches of magic. Yet the evidence, buried within manuscripts of early magical scholars and the traditions of the four founders, suggests that Slytherin may have been the mind behind one of the first defensive barriers that could repel not only hostile intruders, but also spells themselves. The irony is sharp. The man whom many associate with danger and secrecy may have given Hogwarts its most enduring safeguard. The foundations of this story lie in the scattered accounts of early medieval wizardry, a time when magical communities were fragmented and often under attack from fearful muggles and rival wizard clans. When Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin agreed to build a school, they faced not only the challenge of uniting students but also the very real threat of outside hostility. Ordinary charms of concealment existed, of course, simple, muggle-repelling jinxes and invisibility wards, but they were fragile, easily broken by strong-willed sorcerers. The protective spell attributed to Slytherin went further. It was said to weave a shao, barrier that disarmed offensive curses before they struck, dispersing their energy into the air as if the magic had been swallowed whole by the stones of the castle. This was not mere superstition. One medieval text, attributed to the historian Laurentius the Grey, describes a wall of silence conjured by the serpent-born, against which no spell did cling and no man could pass unbidden. To understand why Slytherin would devise such a spell, one must look beyond the simplistic caricature of him as only a supporter of dark practices. J.K. Rowling herself reminds us in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets that Slytherin was a brilliant wizard, and brilliance rarely confines itself to one field. His preoccupation with secrecy and protection of what he considered purity might well have led him to develop methods that kept his visions safe. Defensive magic in this context was not a contradiction, but a necessity. If the founders wanted Hogwarts to stand for centuries, they required more than bravery or wisdom. They required impregnable safeguards. What better mind than Slytherin's, sharp, cautious, and deeply attuned to power to invent such an art? Specific examples of how this spell manifested can be seen in the castle itself. The Forbidden Forest is often considered a natural boundary, but the true shield lies in the enchantments woven into the very grounds. Centuries later, when Voldemort's forces assaulted Hogwarts in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, we see echoes of something ancient. Professor McGonagall and the other professors conjured protective charms that shimmered across the sky like glass domes, yet even these were described as old magic, enhanced by spells layered over generations. Could it be that Slytherin's original barrier formed the first layer upon which all others were built? The persistence of such protective enchantments suggests a foundation so strong that it required only reinforcement, not reinvention. Rowena Ravenclaw was known for her intellect, Gryffindor for his courage, and Hufflepuff for her loyalty, but each founder brought their talents to the fortress of Hogwarts. Historical notes credit Ravenclaw with devising charms of concealment that kept the castle invisible from prying Muggle eyes, while Gryffindor supposedly crafted the enchantments binding the castle's weaponry and defences against siege. Slytherin, according to these accounts, focused on the deeper ward, the intangible barrier, that not only shielded but actively neutralized curses, a protective spell that rejected not just entry but intent itself. In this way, his contribution was the most paradoxical, defense born from a mind often accused of favoring aggression. An oft-overlooked clue rests in a line from the Deathly Hallows when Harry recalls Dumbledore's words, "It was strong magic, ancient magic, to which Voldemort had no access." The enchantments protecting Harry himself are described as something primal, rooted in the sacrifice of his mother. Yet Dumbledore frequently drew parallels between such ancient enchantments and the protections surrounding Hogwarts. Could the castle's core defences stem not only from love and loyalty, but also from a spell designed by the founder most maligned for coldness and ambition? If so, it paints a more complex picture of Slytherin, not merely a sorcerer of shadows, but a craftsman of enduring walls. Some accounts tell of a duel between Slytherin and a rival wizard, a confrontation in which Slytherin conjured an invisible shield that caused his opponent's curses to dissolve before touching him. The duel is said to have ended not in victory by destruction, but in exhaustion, for the enemy could not breach the barrier. Whether apocryphal or not, the story mirrors the kind of magic that later generations would attribute to the protective wards around the school. This episode illustrates that Slytherin did not invent for destruction alone. He sought dominance by making himself unassailable. Protection and power in his eyes were not opposites but allies. The legacy of this supposed invention reverberates in how wizards attempted to replicate it. Shield charms like Protego are defensive, but they are temporary, conjured in the heat of combat. The spell attributed to Slytherin was enduring, woven into stones, soil, and air, creating a permanent sanctuary. When Hermione Granger explains in The Half-Blood Prince that some magic is too ancient to be learned from books, she unknowingly echoes the very essence of such a spell. Slytherin's enchantment was not merely cast, it was bound into the architecture, a rare art that blurred the line between magic and environment. One cannot overlook the irony that Voldemort, a proud heir of Slytherin, never sought to strengthen such protections. His obsession lay with breaking through defences, not preserving them. When he finally assaulted Hogwarts, it was the wards, rooted perhaps in his ancestors' craft, that delayed him long enough for the students and staff to rally. In a sense, Voldemort was undone not only by love and courage, but by a legacy of protection crafted by the very founder he revered. This twist of fate is haunting, the serpent's shield protecting against the serpent's heir. The protective spell attributed to Slytherin also explains why Hogwarts remained untouched during times of crisis in magical history. During the witch hunts of the 15th and 16th centuries, Muggle witch-finders came dangerously close to magical settlements, yet the castle remained hidden and inviolable. Ordinary concealment charms might have faltered against determined searchers, but a barrier that dissolved intent itself would make entry impossible. The legend of the impenetrable schools spread quietly, reinforcing Hogwarts' aura as a fortress of safety, even when its founder's reputation cast shadows. Rowling's own text provides subtle confirmation of these theories. In the Chamber of Secrets, Dumbledore remarks that only a true Slytherin could have opened the chamber. This line ties Slytherin's genius to secret magic interwoven with the castle. If he could engineer a hidden chamber guarded by a basilisk, why not also a barrier that kept enemies at bay? The technical skill is the same. Enchantments that endure across centuries, surviving the erosion of time and remaining effective long after their caster is gone. This is not the work of a reckless dark wizard, but of a visionary craftsman. The possibility that Slytherin created such a spell forces readers to rethink the moral categories often imposed on the founders. Darkness and defense are not cleanly divided. A wizard may study serpents and secrecy while simultaneously preserving a fortress for generations. Just as Snape, a Slytherin, mastered both the dark arts and defensive countercurses, so too could Slytherin have embodied contradiction. He may have sought to exclude those he deemed unworthy, but in the same stroke he preserved the school as a sanctuary. This tension lies at the heart of his legacy, exclusion paired with protection. It is also worth considering the personal motivations behind such a spell. For a man who distrusted outsiders, particularly those of Muggle descent, creating a barrier that allowed only invited passage was the perfect solution. To him, defense was a means of control. To the other founders, it was a shield for all students. Thus, a spell rooted in exclusion evolved into a protection that safeguarded all. The founders may have disagreed with his values, but they could not deny the usefulness of his creation. In this way, the protective enchantment outlived the man, reshaped by the intentions of his colleagues. The story of Slytherin's spell is not merely a footnote in the history of magic. It is a reminder that the boundaries between light and dark, aggression and defense are porous. Wizards and witches often bear contradictions, and even those remembered for division may contribute to preservation. The shield that perhaps still shimmers unseen around Hogwarts may be the truest testament to this paradox. The stones that have heard centuries of laughter, grief, and battle are kept safe not only by courage and wisdom, but by the ingenuity of a founder who sought control and, in doing so, gave protection. Number 22. The founders swore a blood oath. The story of Hogwarts' founding has always been wrapped in myth, yet hidden beneath the legend lies something darker and far more binding than mere friendship between four extraordinary witches and wizards. Godric Gryffindor, Salazar Slytherin, Helga Hufflepuff, and Rowena Ravenclaw were not simply colleagues who dreamed of a school. They were visionaries who understood that a project of such magnitude required more than trust. Ancient records suggest that they performed a blood oath at the moment of the school's creation, cutting their palms and allowing the mingled drops to fall upon the foundation stone. The oath was said to tie their lives, their legacies, and the very bricks of the castle into one unbreakable bond. To speak of this is not to invent a tale for children. It is to consider a forgotten piece of wizarding history, one that may explain why Hogwarts has stood for 1,000 years without falling to ruin. The oath was more than a symbolic gesture. In early medieval wizarding culture, blood magic was feared and revered as one of the most binding forms of sorcery. Salazar Slytherin himself was rumoured to be a master of such rituals, drawing from the traditions of the old pure-blood families of Britain. When four of the most powerful witches and wizards of their time mingled blood for a single cause, the enchantment that followed would have been monumental. The school did not simply rise because of stone and spellwork. It breathed with the power of their shared essence. As one chronicler from the 12th century wrote, "Hogwarts shall endure while their oath endures, and their oath was carved in living flesh." Though no copy of this chronicle survives in the Hogwarts library, Fragments of it are mentioned in Magical Histories of the Isles by Phineas Blackthorne, a wizarding historian of the 17th century. The protective qualities of the castle can be seen throughout the saga of Harry Potter himself. When Voldemort laid siege to Hogwarts in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the school withstood attacks that would have shattered lesser fortresses. Giants, Dementors, and Death Eaters pressed against its walls, yet the castle held. Professor McGonagall even declared, "Hogwarts is threatened. Man the boundaries. Protect us. Do your duty to our school." The speed with which protective enchantments spread across every turret and corridor seems beyond the capacity of ordinary defensive charms. Some scholars argue that the defense is awakened because the blood oath still pulses within the school, a hidden covenant refusing to let the sanctuary fall to outside force. Consider too the curious persistence of the founders themselves within the castle's memory. Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem haunted the school for centuries, carrying her essence in a way that feels more deliberate than accidental. The Sorting Hat, stitched together by Gryffindor, speaks with the voices of all four founders, channeling wisdom long past their mortal years. Even the Chamber of Secrets carved by Slytherin maintained its secrets for generations, as if the stones themselves remembered his will. Helga Hufflepuff's enchanted cup survived as a relic infused with loyalty and endurance. These are not coincidences, but echoes of a vow that ensured each founder would forever remain tied to the institution they birthed. A castle may be bricks and towers, but Hogwarts is more than architecture. It is a vessel of promises sealed in blood. Some readers may object, pointing to the fact that blood oaths are never explicitly mentioned in J.K. Rowling's books, yet absence in text does not equal absence in law. Within Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Dumbledore speaks cryptically of the school's ancient magic. When Harry asks about protections on the stone, he is told, "There are many things you don't understand yet." That ancient magic could very well be the remnants of the Founders' Covenant. The idea that their spirits manifest in moments of crisis is not without precedent, for in the final battle, Harry himself saw the echoes of his parents and allies when he held the Resurrection Stone. If spirits can return when summoned by an artifact, how much stronger would be the presence of four founders bound eternally by their own blood? The very geography of Hogwarts suggests a design meant to channel and amplify the oath. The castle is built upon powerful ley lines, with the Black Lake, Forbidden Forest, and surrounding mountains creating a natural fortress. It is said that Gryffindor chose the location for its defensibility, while Ravenclaw calculated the magical currents to enhance spellwork. When their blood fell upon the stone, it seeped into this nexus of energies, binding not just the castle, but the land itself. Perhaps this is why intruders, from trolls to dark lords, never managed to claim the castle outright. They could enter, they could wreak havoc, but Hogwarts always expelled or destroyed them in the end. The place itself seems to reject domination, as though the oath still whispers, "This is sanctuary." One of the most fascinating pieces of supporting evidence comes from the peculiar phenomenon of Hogwarts ghosts. Unlike ordinary phantoms, who are merely imprints of the dead, the castle's resident spirits often display an uncanny tie to the history of the school. Nearly Headless Nick remarks in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix that Hogwarts has a way of keeping those who matter close. Could this be the lingering effect of the Founder's blood? The Bloody Baron, himself linked to Slytherin's line, roams with a despair too ancient for any single lifetime. Helena Ravenclaw is drawn back to the halls her mother built. Even the Fat Friar reflects Helga's kindness, tethered by a loyalty that defies centuries. These spectral presences suggest that death itself cannot sever ties to Hogwarts when blood has once been spilled for its cause. Skeptics argue that the blood oath theory veers too close to folklore, but history is riddled with wizarding practices that modern witches and wizards would prefer to forget. Blood pacts appear again in the story of Gellert Grindelwald and Albus Dumbledore, who crafted a magical pact preventing them from dueling. That single bond controlled the fate of wizarding Europe for decades. If two wizards could shape history through one drop of shared blood, imagine the force of four founders uniting their strength for eternity. The comparison alone makes the possibility of a founding oath not only plausible, but likely. Rowena Ravenclaw's tragic death offers another layer to the theory. Legends say she died of a broken heart when her daughter Helena fled with the diadem. Yet in some accounts, her final words included a plea for Hogwarts to remain safe. It is tempting to see her death not just as sorrow, but as a continuation of her bond to the school, as though her life and spirit were willingly surrendered into the very stones she helped raise. In that sense, her ghost is not a restless wanderer, but a guardian bound by oath. When Harry later encounters the Grey Lady in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, her intensity, her refusal to leave, reflects more than maternal regret. It echoes the unbroken promise to protect the legacy of the founders. Salazar Slytherin's departure from the school complicates the matter. How could a man who left in anger still be bound by a blood oath to preserve Hogwarts? The answer lies in the magical nature of such vows. They do not depend on goodwill once spoken. A blood oath enslaves the will, ensuring that even betrayal cannot unravel the binding. Slytherin could abandon his colleagues, could hide a basilisk deep within the castle, yet he could not destroy what he had sworn to sustain. His legacy remained in secret chambers and whispered warnings, but the castle itself endured, refusing to yield to his darker ambitions. In a twisted way, the oath forced Slytherin's hand. He could not undo the sanctuary, only reshape parts of it to serve his lineage. The endurance of Hogwarts across centuries of political turmoil further supports the idea of a protective covenant. Wars between wizarding clans, invasions by Muggle monarchs, the rise and fall of Dark Lords all raged outside its walls, yet the castle remained. Not once in 1,000 years has it been permanently seized or destroyed. Even during the height of Voldemort's power, when he controlled the Ministry, Hogwarts still resisted. The Carrows enforced cruelty within its walls, but the castle itself seemed to conspire with those who resisted, from secret passages aiding the DA to the room of requirement adapting to every need. Such resilience feels like the living heartbeat of a pact made long ago. Dumbledore himself often hinted at mysteries deeper than textbooks could explain. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, he tells Harry, "Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it." Many interpret this as reassurance, but some historians see it as acknowledgement of the founders' enduring oath. The school is not merely a building, but a participant, an entity compelled to assist its own. That compulsion would be difficult to explain without some primal enchantment, and blood oaths remain the most binding form known in wizarding tradition. It is no small matter to claim that the founder's blood still powers the enchantments of Hogwarts, yet the evidence weaves a compelling pattern. The castle breathes with personality, shelters its chosen, and resists corruption even when tyrants sit in its headmaster's chair. It offers wisdom through relics, voices through artifacts, and visions through its ghosts. Such qualities surpass ordinary enchantment. They suggest the living memory of four individuals who once cut their palms, mingled blood, and swore that their creation would never fall. When Harry Potter himself stood on the battlefield of Hogwarts, rallying the defenders against Voldemort, the walls did not merely shelter them. They roared with defiance. Statues came alive, staircases shifted to hinder enemies, and the very air pulsed with ancient spells. It was as if the castle remembered its promise. The courage of Gryffindor, the ambition of Slytherin, the loyalty of Hufflepuff, and the wisdom of Ravenclaw all converged in those final hours. The blood of the founders, spilled centuries before, still sang in stone and fire, whispering, "This is sanctuary. This is eternal." Number 23, Gryffindor possessed the magic of words. Godric Gryffindor has always been remembered as the warrior among the four founders, the man who carried a sword forged by goblins and stood ready to face any threat. Yet hidden beneath the clang of steel was a quieter, more mysterious gift, his mastery of words. Legends insist that Gryffindor's voice carried more than eloquence. It carried power, persuasion, and the ability to bend the will of others without a single spell being cast. Chroniclers from later centuries wrote that when Godric spoke, his words seemed to shine like firelight in the dark, warming allies and burning away the doubts of enemies. This rare talent, sometimes described as a form of word magic, distinguished him from his peers and became the unseen force that allowed the dream of Hogwarts to take shape. The sword could defeat an enemy on the battlefield, but the voice of Gryffindor convinced people to gather, trust, and build. It is not difficult to see why such a gift would be essential in the turbulent 10th century. Magical Britain was fragmented, clans of witches and wizards lived in isolation, and Muggle suspicion was growing sharper with every passing year. Rowena Ravenclaw had intellect and strategy, Salazar Slytherin had ambition and cunning, Helga Hufflepuff had patience and kindness. Each possessed qualities necessary for survival, yet none of them alone could have persuaded rival families and proud magicians to unite under a single vision. Contemporary lore suggests that Gryffindor's speeches, delivered with both courage and sincerity, broke down the walls of mistrust. The chronicler Cantankerous Knott, writing in a much later period, described Godric as the lion whose roar made even serpents listen. Such phrases, although embellished, preserve the memory of a man whose power lay not only in spellwork, but in the rhythm of language itself. There are fragments of stories that place Gryffindor in the midst of heated councils where alliances nearly collapsed. One particular tale tells of the moment when Rowena Ravenclaw hesitated to join forces with Salazar Slytherin. She distrusted his ambition and feared the consequences of his obsession with blood purity. In that council, according to the legend recorded in the Chronicle of Founders, Gryffindor rose and spoke words that silenced both sides. His argument was not dressed in complex philosophy, but in plain "A fortress divided is a fortress already conquered." The legend claims that these words struck such force into the hearts of those present that Ravenclaw conceded the necessity of unity, and even Slytherin, known for pride, nodded in grudging agreement. Whether these exact words were spoken cannot be proven, but the tale emphasizes that Gryffindor's speech carried the resonance of a spell, compelling agreement where reason alone failed. The Harry Potter books themselves echo this ancient tradition of Gryffindor's gift, though indirectly. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when the Sorting Hat describes Godric Gryffindor, it sings of bold Gryffindor from Wild Moor, who valued daring and nerve above all. The Hat's verses often carry layers of memory inherited from the founders, and some scholars believe that the choice of words, from Wild Moor, suggests not just a rugged warrior, but a figure who tamed wild hearts with language. The moors were places of wind and echo, and in metaphor they became the stage for Gryffindor's voice. It is striking that the Hat never emphasizes his sword, but rather the spirit he inspired. Inspiration, after all, flows not from steel, but from speech. An even stronger suggestion appears in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore reflects on the power of words. He tells Harry, "Words are, in my not-so-humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic." Many readers interpret this line as Dumbledore's wisdom alone, yet the echo of Gryffindor lingers beneath it. Dumbledore was himself a Gryffindor, and his reverence for language might have been influenced by the founder whose legacy still shaped the house. When Dumbledore convinces Fudge to recognize Voldemort's return, or when he addresses the assembled school with calm authority, the spectre of Gryffindor's word magic seems to reappear across centuries. The continuity between founder and descendant reinforces the belief that Godric left more than a sword. He left an understanding of speech as enchantment. The story most often retold by wizarding historians involves the agreement to build Hogwarts itself. Salazar Slytherin distrusted the idea of opening their fortress to children from every family. He wanted a more exclusive order, bound by bloodline and secrecy. Helga Hufflepuff opposed him fiercely, but her gentle nature often softened her arguments into appeals rather than demands. It was Godric who stepped forward, standing between them, and turned dispute into resolution. The tale says that he reminded them that their names would mean nothing if they did not leave a lasting legacy. "Let us build a refuge," he declared, "not for our own power, but for the children who will come after us." The chroniclers write that Slytherin's eyes narrowed, yet he did not walk away. Gryffindor's words had bought time, enough to allow the dream to become stone walls and enchanted towers. Some scholars argue that this magic of words was not a metaphor, but an actual magical discipline now lost. Ancient Celtic traditions, such as the bardic spells, believed that verses could carry enchantments. The Druids were said to weave protection through chants, to summon courage with poetry, to unravel fear with rhythm. Gryffindor, hailing from the wild moors of Britain, may have inherited fragments of this tradition. If so, his ability to persuade was more than charisma, it was sorcery hidden in syllables. One can imagine him reciting phrases that resonated with listeners' very blood, commanding assent as surely as the imperious curse, but without violating free will. His magic would not dominate, but awaken the courage already inside. This theory, though speculative, illuminates why stories describe even his opponents as willingly persuaded. A specific example survives in the old ballad known as The Oath of the Founders. Though written centuries after their lifetimes, it purports to preserve the words Gryffindor spoke when the four finally agreed to build the school. The ballad records, "By hearth and sword, by quill and wand, let none unmake what we have bound." These lines carry the cadence of spellwork, structured with parallel rhythm and solemn vow. Whether Gryffindor actually uttered them is debatable, yet their survival in oral tradition points to the enduring memory of his verbal power. A spell carved in stone fades, but a phrase sung by generations endures. The importance of this gift becomes clearer when we consider what followed. Slytherin eventually departed, leaving discord behind, but the school survived because the initial foundation had been built with conviction. Gryffindor's words had not only persuaded but planted seeds of loyalty among staff and students. Without that verbal magic, the quarrels of the founders might have shattered the project before its first walls rose. In a sense, every young witch and wizard who later walked through the castle's doors was stepping into a monument shaped as much by language as by stone. Hogwarts was not only constructed by hands and wands, but by words that bound vision to reality. In contrast to the sword that hangs in the headmaster's office, shining as a relic of battle, Gryffindor's verbal legacy is invisible, yet invisibility does not mean weakness. The bravery that the Sorting Hat praises, the daring choices made by generations of students, often begin with the courage to speak. Harry himself standing before Umbridge or confronting Voldemort wins not only by wand work, but by words. When he proclaims, "You'll never know love or friendship, and I feel sorry for you," at the climax of the final battle, he is echoing Gryffindor's tradition. The belief that truth spoken boldly carries magic more enduring than curses. That legacy ties the boy who lived to the founder whose voice built the school that sheltered him. It is tempting to imagine what conversations must have taken place among the four founders in candlelit halls. Ravenclaw with her precise arguments, Hufflepuff with her soft reasoning, Slytherin with his sharp rebuttals, and then Gryffindor, whose words did not merely add another perspective but redirected the entire debate. The others may have had sharper logic, yet his sentences bore a fire that melted pride. To modern readers, this ability may seem exaggerated, yet anyone who has heard a gifted orator knows how a single phrase can shift hearts. Gryffindor embodied that principle in a magical age, turning rhetoric into sorcery. Some historians connect this legacy to the very existence of the Sorting Hat. Originally, the hat belonged to Gryffindor himself, and when the founders enchanted it to judge students, his voice became part of its essence. The hat does not only analyze minds, it persuades them, whispers into them, shapes their decisions. How many first years, trembling with doubt, heard its voice and suddenly found courage? That persuasive undertone may well be Gryffindor's bequest, his word magic, continuing to shape lives a millennium later. The hat's annual songs, poetic and commanding, are a direct expression of the founders' belief in language as enchantment. Critics might argue that Gryffindor's gift is nothing but a romantic invention of later storytellers. Yet even if the tales exaggerate, their persistence reveals a truth deeper than fact. Communities remember what resonates, and the memory of Gryffindor's persuasive speech filled a need in the mythology of Hogwarts. He represented not only bravery, but leadership, and leadership requires more than strength. It requires the ability to convince others to follow. His sword was only half his arsenal. The other half was the unseen fire in his words. The Gryffindor common room, with its roaring hearth, stands as a symbol of that fire, a warmth of conviction that spreads through speech as much as flame. Thus, the legacy of Godric Gryffindor is twofold. He remains the lion-hearted knight, bearer of a goblin-made sword, champion of the brave. But he also remains the silver-tongued founder whose phrases were remembered like spells. His magic of words built bridges where swords could not. Without him, the four might never have united, Hogwarts might never have risen, and the wizarding world would have lacked its greatest sanctuary. Every time Dumbledore, McGonagall, or even Harry himself speaks truth with courage, the echo of that founder resounds. Godric Gryffindor wielded not just the power of steel, but the far greater power of speech, and in that lies the true enchantment of his legacy. Number 24, Ravenclaw left behind a secret testament. Rowena Ravenclaw has always been described in the histories of Hogwarts as the most enigmatic of the four founders, a woman whose brilliance rivaled her silence. The Sorting Hat sings of her wit beyond measure as the greatest treasure, and scholars have long debated what form this wit might have taken. Yet beyond the famous diadem she created, another story persists in whispers among magical historians. That Rowena, sometimes called Candida Ravenclaw in older manuscripts, left behind a written testament, not of wealth, but of riddles, a secret document hidden deep in the heart of Hogwarts itself. Unlike Godric Gryffindor's sword, which rests in plain sight for the worthy, or Salazar Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets built in stone and legend, Ravenclaw's supposed legacy is written in ink, cipher, and symbol. The story first appears in fragments attributed to a 12th century chronicler, Caradoc Dearborn, who wrote of a parchment penned by the Lady of the Blue, sealed in silver clasp, resting where tongues are hushed and minds are sharpened. To those versed in Hogwarts, this description seems unmistakably linked to the library, that vast labyrinth of shelves where Madame Pince still patrols with an eagle's vigilance. The speculation is that Ravenclaw herself, foreseeing the fickle tides of memory, entrusted her knowledge not to bloodlines or vaults, but to words concealed. Within the very house of learning she helped build. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure, the Sorting Hat reminds us in Harry Potter, and the Order of the Phoenix. And what greater wit than leaving behind a riddle whose solution may yet reshape the castle itself? What makes this legend more than idle invention are the strange phenomena of Hogwarts that no headmaster, from Phineas Nigellus Black to Albus Dumbledore, has ever fully explained. The shifting staircases, for instance, whose movements defy any known spell of architecture. First-year students complain bitterly of steps that lead them astray, while older pupils learn to anticipate their whims. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, we hear how the staircases change. Sometimes you'll find yourself on a landing you didn't expect. Dumbledore himself once admitted to a young professor that even he could not predict the castle's living map. Was it Ravenclaw's secret testament that encoded the runes of such enchantments, leaving behind instructions for their hidden maintenance? The theory grows stronger when considering the existence of disappearing rooms. The most famous of these is the Room of Requirement, revealed in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix when Neville Longbottom stumbles upon it by accident. "This is the Room of Requirement," Dobby explained to Harry once. "It only appears when a person has real need of it." Though many attribute this to centuries of layering enchantments, some historians insist the room is far older, tied directly to the mind of Ravenclaw herself. They suggest that the secret testament contains formulas for bending the castle's walls and stairways, making stone answer thought. The very notion of architecture responding to intellect mirrors Ravenclaw's philosophy, where the sharpness of the mind reshapes the world. Imagine for a moment the library as the hiding place. Among its shelves lurk books chained to the desks, volumes that scream when opened, and grimoires so ancient their spines crumble at touch. It is there, some argue, that Ravenclaw buried her testament, perhaps within a book disguised as common, perhaps as marginalia, written in an existing tome. Even Hermione Granger, who spent countless hours prowling those aisles, could have brushed past it unknowingly. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hermione boasted, "I checked this out weeks ago for a bit of light reading." That casual remark illustrates the density of the library's secrets. If light reading involves alchemy, how much darker might the shelves hold, and how much more concealed could Ravenclaw's final words be? There is also the tantalizing matter of Ravenclaw's preference for riddles and puzzles. The entrance to her common room requires the answering of a question, not the utterance of a password. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Luna Lovegood escorts Harry there, the bronze knocker asks, which came first, the phoenix or the flame? The idea that a founder so enamored with intellectual challenge would leave behind a testament of cryptic runes aligns perfectly with her nature. It would not be a simple record of charms, but a document demanding wit and persistence, a parchment that resists the unworthy and yields only to those whose minds match her own. Skeptics, of course, argue against such romantic notions. They point out that no mention of the testament appears in Dumbledore's extensive notes, nor in the writings of Bathilda Bagshot, author of A History of Magic. Yet absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially in a castle whose walls conceal secrets for centuries. Consider the Marauder's Map, created by 4 mischievous students in the 1970s, whose existence was unknown to the staff for decades. If students could conceal such a device, surely Rowena Ravenclaw, a founder of extraordinary ability, could hide a testament from even the wisest headmasters. One particularly compelling anecdote comes from the diaries of Eupraxia Mole, a 17th century librarian of Hogwarts. She recorded a curious incident where she discovered a manuscript of shifting ink, words rearranging themselves depending on the angle of light. She confessed in her diary that she could not decipher its meaning, but before she could investigate further, the manuscript vanished, as if spirited away by the shelves themselves. Some magical historians believe this could have been a fragment of Ravenclaw's testament, revealing itself briefly before retreating once more into the castle's living architecture. There is also the peculiar connection to Ravenclaw's daughter Helena, the Grey Lady who wanders as a ghost through the corridors. Helena once stole her mother's diadem, believing it would grant her wisdom, and fled across Europe until the Bloody Baron brought her back in tragedy. Yet Helena's words to Harry in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows hold a subtle clue. "My mother's diadem, it was lost for centuries, you know." If the diadem itself could be lost, perhaps her mother intended the testament to be hidden as well, not for theft, but for eventual discovery by one who truly needed it. Helena never speaks of a written legacy, but her guarded manner suggests knowledge she chooses not to reveal. What might the testament contain if it exists? Some suggest formulas for controlling the living enchantments of Hogwarts. the blueprints of the staircases, the keys to the doors that vanish, the runes that call forth hidden rooms. Others believe it could hold personal philosophies, meditations on the relationship between intellect and power, perhaps warnings against the misuse of knowledge. In an era where Salazar Slytherin plotted against Muggleborns and Godric Gryffindor glorified valor, Ravenclaw may have sought to leave behind a different legacy, that the mind itself is the true battlefield, and only those who sharpen it may rule the chaos of magic. The stakes of such a discovery would be immense. Imagine if the testament were found today. Hermione Granger, now a prominent figure in the Ministry of Magic, would almost certainly lead the research, guided by her lifelong devotion to books. Magical architects could unravel the living structure of Hogwarts, mapping the logic behind the staircases and perhaps stabilizing them. Yet others warn that to tamper with Ravenclaw's design might destroy the very magic that makes the castle alive. As Dumbledore once said, Hogwarts is a stronghold of ancient magic. To interfere with that magic is to risk unraveling 1,000 years of enchantment. Support for the legend also emerges from the peculiar fact that Hogwarts has always resisted cartography. When Argus Filch attempted to create a floor plan in the 1980s, the parchment bit back, burning his fingers. Only the Marauder's map ever succeeded, and even then only imperfectly. Could it be that Ravenclaw wove protective spells described in her testament, designed to prevent the castle from being pinned down by mundane minds? The shifting staircases and elusive rooms may not be quirks at all, but deliberate defences encoded by Ravenclaw to ensure that only those with wit and adaptability thrive within her walls. A further layer of intrigue comes from the testimonies of portraits. The Fat Friar once remarked that the castle has moods, a curious statement for a ghost to make. Likewise, the portraits of former headmasters have hinted at times that the castle itself chooses when to reveal certain secrets. This aligns with the idea of Ravenclaw's testament as a living document, one that surfaces only when the right mind approaches it. Perhaps the parchment responds to thought, rearranging its symbols to reflect the intellect of its reader. A Gryffindor might see bravery-laden riddles, a Slytherin cunning stratagems, but a true Ravenclaw would see the core message, hidden across centuries. Ultimately, whether fact or myth, the legend of Ravenclaw's secret testament shapes how generations perceive Hogwarts. For the students who climb its shifting staircases or stumble into disappearing rooms, the castle is more than stone. It is a puzzle, a challenge set by the founder who believed wisdom the highest treasure. To believe in the testament is to believe that every trick of the castle has purpose, that each inconvenience hides design. As Harry once reflected when faced with the mysteries of magic, there was a lot more to magic, as he was learning, than waving your wand and saying a few funny words. Ravenclaw knew this truth centuries before him, and if her testament truly lies waiting, then Hogwarts still holds its greatest riddle unsolved. Number 25. Hufflepuff healed using enchanted herbs. Of all the tales whispered through the echoing halls of Hogwarts, none hold more warmth and quiet reverence than those surrounding Helga Hufflepuff. Known in Russian tradition as Puffendui, she was not the warrior that Godric Gryffindor became, nor the seeker of knowledge that Rowena Ravenclaw embodied, nor the proud aristocrat of Salazar Slytherin. She was something far gentler but no less powerful, a healer whose mastery of herbs and spells transcended the ordinary. The chronicles of early wizarding Britain often describe her as a figure who preferred gardens to battlefields and who discovered that the right herb, when paired with the right incantation, could mend wounds no steel wand blast could. It is here that her reputation as a founder of magical medicine began, a legacy that still touches the hospital wing of Hogwarts and the shelves of St. Mungo's. Her gift lay not only in tending gardens but in understanding their hidden voices. In her own handwritten manuscripts, fragments of which survive in the restricted section of the Hogwarts Library, she described how plants speak in colours, scents, and roots. These words echo centuries later in the textbooks of herbology and healing, through history. Where others saw dittany as a single cure for cuts, Hufflepuff discovered that when its leaves were steeped in a mixture of crushed fluxweed and bound by the charm Cura Vitale, the healing sped as though nature itself had bent forward to seal the wound. This synthesis of plant and spell became her art. The great historian Elidora Marchbanks once wrote that it was Helga Hufflepuff who taught us that wand and root must work together or else healing is incomplete. Her reputation as a talented znachaka, or folk healer, spread quickly. In the dark forests of 10th century Britain, where magical maladies often met only crude charms or desperate prayers, she appeared like a beacon of hope. Legends tell of a young witch named Penelope of Wye, a disciple of Hufflepuff's craft, who became known for her healing prowess. It was said that Penelope's hands carried the scent of marigold and thyme, and that her cauldrons steamed with a greenish glow that frightened away illness. Her skill, however, was not separate from Hufflepuff, but born of her teaching. Penelope's name surfaces in parchment. Scraps preserved by the Ravenclaw archives, noting that she once cured a feverish child, where no incantation of fever-breaking would answer, and no prayer to the old gods would come. When reading Rowling's Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, one recalls Madame Pomfrey's careful tending of petrified students. Pomfrey, who embodies the spirit of Hufflepuff's legacy, often relied on both plants and spells. In the text, we hear, "You will be able to cure them, won't you?" asked Hermione worriedly. "Never fear," said Madame Pomfrey stiffly. "I will be able to cure them." Though the book does not say so directly, the potions she brewed for those stricken by the basilisk's gaze were rooted in methods traced back to Helga Hufflepuff herself. The Mandrake restorative draught, which played the central role in that cure, was exactly the sort of combined herb and charm solution Helga pioneered. One cannot help but feel that every bubbling cauldron in Pomfrey's care carries an echo of Helga's first experiments. The idea that herbs could exceed spells was revolutionary in an age dominated by displays of magical force. Godric Gryffindor carved his legacy with a sword and blazing duels, Salazar Slytherin through cunning enchantments and political power, and Rowena Ravenclaw with her vast magical intellect. But Hufflepuff's strength lay in patience. Contemporary sources claim she once healed a fatal curse wound that even Gryffindor's most ardent charms could not mend. The story says that after a duel against invading warlocks, a young wizard lay dying from a hex that rotted flesh. Helga prepared a paste of murtlap essence, infused it with a subtle spell, and bound it to the wound. By dawn, the boy breathed easily. "Helga's hands drew out death itself," wrote one chronicler. This tale may be half legend, but it reflects a truth. She was a healer who stood against hopelessness. Penelope's example provides us with a more grounded history. It is said she treated an outbreak of dragonpox in the Welsh valleys. Traditional charms failed against the fever, families despaired. But Penelope, following Helga's lessons, crafted a potion from asphodel and silverweed, enchanted with a murmured chant taught by her mistress. Witnesses later testified that children rose from their beds within 3 days. The outbreak faded and her reputation grew. The name Penelope the Teat Healer still flickers in obscure pages of the magical chronicles of Wales. What matters is not just her cures, but that she illustrated how Helga's knowledge passed into the hands of future generations, becoming not myth, but practice. Even in modern Hogwarts, the shadow of this healing philosophy remains. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, students learned from Professor Slughorn that bezoars could save lives when slipped into a poisoned goblet. Harry himself remembered this fact in time to save Ron Weasley. Though Slughorn presented it as potion-making knowledge, its origins lie far earlier. Hufflepuff's fascination with combining natural defenses and incantations made such remedies part of common magical lore. Harry's act of thrusting a bezoar down Ron's throat is, in a sense, a tribute to her legacy. Instinctive reliance on nature's gift in combination with wizard's courage. What sets Hufflepuff apart was not merely technical skill but her philosophy of inclusivity. She opened her table to all students, regardless of lineage or prowess. This attitude spilled into her healing. She treated the wounded whether they were allies or enemies, wizard or squib. A parchment fragment in the archives of St. Mungo's claims that she once nursed an injured Muggle knight, risking the suspicion of her fellow founders. The chronicler wrote, "Her heart did not ask bloodlines but wounds." In this, her healing was not only magical but profoundly moral. Her methods challenged the exclusivity that defined Slytherin's vision of Hogwarts. The great irony is that much of wizarding society still views Hufflepuff House as gentle or unremarkable. Yet her work laid the foundation for the healing arts that protect countless witches and wizards. Madame Pomfrey, who could regrow bones and cure petrification, followed a direct line of tradition. Even the great healer Dilys Derwent, once headmistress of Hogwarts and later a celebrated healer at St. Mungo's, spoke in her journals of the ancient recipes of Helga, whose herbs made my hand steady. Without Hufflepuff, there may have been no institutional magical medicine, only scattered folk cures and inconsistent charms. It is also crucial to understand how dangerous her craft could be. Experimenting with plants that possessed volatile magical properties often resulted in accidents. One forgotten text, The Green Witch of the West, recounts that Hufflepuff's apprentices occasionally suffered burns or hallucinations when handling improperly brewed mixtures. Penelope herself is said to have endured blindness for 3 days after inhaling fumes from a miscast potion of monkshood and daisy root. These dangers underscore the courage within her gentleness. Healing was not passive, it required boldness equal to battle. Rowling's books offer subtle glimpses of this legacy through symbolic plants. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Neville Longbottom's growing confidence in herbology reflects the underestimated power of plants. He tells Harry, "There's a plant that'll do that," when faced with challenges. His eventual role in defeating Voldemort mirrors Hufflepuff's own lesson. The quiet knowledge of herbs and persistence can alter the course of great battles. Neville's passion would have found approval in Helga's eyes, perhaps even reminding her of Penelope, the apprentice who carried forth her flame. The theme of herbs surpassing spells echoes in small yet powerful details. When Lupin treated Harry's wounds with chocolate after a Dementor attack, he tapped into the same philosophy. The world provides remedies that, with the right knowledge, become magic themselves. Though not directly linked to Helga, the idea belongs to her lineage. Healing is not always about dazzling incantations, but about the marriage of simple substance and compassionate intent. Scholars sometimes argue whether Helga Hufflepuff should be called the mother of magical medicine. Some counter that other cultures had healers long before Hogwarts. Yet what cannot be denied is that she institutionalized and preserved the knowledge, teaching apprentices like Penelope who passed it on in recorded form. Without her, much of wizarding healing might have remained scattered lore lost to time. The organized wards of St. Mungo's are as much monuments to her vision as the Hufflepuff Cup. The memory of Helga's craft lives in relics too. Her famous golden cup, later corrupted by Voldemort into a Horcrux, was originally said to be enchanted to purify any liquid poured within. Some suggest it once served as a healing vessel, transforming simple broth into restorative draughts. The tragedy of its desecration lies not only in its use as dark magic, but in the erasure of its original benevolent purpose. That vessel symbolized her spirit, humble, nurturing, sustaining. Thus, when we trace the history of magical healing, we return again and again to the quiet founder who tended her gardens. Penelope's name remains as a testament to her teaching, proof that the blending of herb and spell could rescue lives when all else failed. And when we hear Madame Pomfrey's stern voice promising recovery, or see Neville clutching a rare plant that holds the key to victory, we glimpse the roots planted centuries earlier by Helga Hufflepuff. She did not seek glory, but her legacy remains etched into every curative draught, every enchanted salve, every whisper of hope in a healer's ward. Number 26. Slytherin experimented with soul-splitting magic. Salazar? Slytherin's name is often uttered with both admiration and suspicion. A man of extraordinary magical ability who co-founded the most famous school of witchcraft in history, and yet whose legacy became inseparable from notions of secrecy, ambition, and the darker edges of magic. Among the many legends whispered about him, one stands above all in controversy: the idea that he once experimented with a charm capable of dividing the soul. Though modern historians usually associate such practices with the horror of Horcrux creation, it is said that Slytherin's original intent was not driven by obsession with immortality, but by the intellectual pursuit of understanding the soul's nature and whether magic could be shared with others. This distinction makes his story particularly fascinating, for it casts him not as a villainous precursor of Voldemort, but as a scholar whose curiosity may have unknowingly set a dangerous precedent. The medieval period in which Slytherin lived was far less structured in magical theory than the age of Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Snape. Wizards often worked in secrecy, inventing spells without formalized ethical codes, guided only by personal belief and ambition. In this context, Salazar's alleged spell, sometimes referred to in obscure manuscripts as the Divisio Animae, was not necessarily viewed as an abomination, but as a bold attempt to push the boundaries of magical science. Records found in the private library of Cantankerous Knot, a 17th-century collector of dark manuscripts, suggest that Slytherin described his work as a method to gift another with one's own essence, as flame kindles flame without diminishing itself. These words hint not at destruction, but at generosity. Yet, as later history proved, once magic touches the soul, the potential for corruption is immense. A striking example of Slytherin's research appears in the legendary chronicle Magica Antiqua, preserved in fragments at the Department of Mysteries. According to its account, Slytherin once demonstrated to a circle of trusted followers how he could imbue a young wizard with additional magical strength by fragmenting a piece of his own life force. The recipient, identified in the text as Corvinus Gaunt, reportedly displayed an unusual surge in spellcasting ability for several months. Capable of conjuring charms and curses beyond his training, he lifted stone with but a gesture, and his voice rang with command over serpents, the manuscript reads. This testimony, though embellished by centuries of retelling, suggests that Slytherin saw the procedure as a way to strengthen his allies, almost as though he envisioned a shared brotherhood of empowered wizards. Yet this pursuit was never without peril. Later passages of the same chronicle report that Corvinus suffered nightmares, exhaustion, and moments of disorientation, muttering words in a tongue unknown even to scholars. Slytherin himself is said to have halted the experiments after seeing what he called a shattering of wholeness. In this detail lies the crucial difference between him and Voldemort. Whereas the Dark Lord welcomed the shattering as a means of personal gain, Salazar recoiled from the very damage he had caused. It was a line he refused to cross again. And yet, the very existence of such a spell would remain as dangerous knowledge in magical history, awaiting those willing to exploit it. This possibility raises uncomfortable questions about the transmission of forbidden lore. Did Slytherin leave behind records of his discoveries, or were they erased by his own hand in an effort to prevent misuse? The Chamber of Secrets itself has been interpreted as more than just a hiding place for the basilisk. Some theorists claim it was also a vault where he stored texts too dangerous for the wider wizarding world. When Tom Riddle uncovered the chamber centuries later, the boy who would become Voldemort may have stumbled across fragments of knowledge that rekindled an ancient fire. As Dumbledore remarked in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, "You are quite wrong. Voldemort is not the only wizard to discover that which is hidden." This quote, though spoken in another context, resonates with the idea that secrets travel silently through time, resurfacing when the world is least prepared. If one compares Slytherin's philosophy with that of Godric Gryffindor, the contrast becomes sharper. Gryffindor valued bravery and the purity of heart in magic, while Slytherin prized ambition and the will to succeed. It is easy to imagine that Gryffindor would have considered soul manipulation as an unacceptable violation of human essence. Helga Hufflepuff and Rowena Ravenclaw, both remembered for their emphasis on fairness and wisdom, likely would have echoed his concern. That Slytherin kept such experiments private, confined to small circles of followers, suggests he anticipated their disapproval. Indeed, the growing tension among the founders may have had less to do with Muggle-born students than history records, and more to do with diverging beliefs about how far magic should trespass into the sacred territory of the soul.